Section 3, Egypt and Nubia. Key ideas. Trade led to cultural diffusion between Egypt and neighboring lands. Nubia had a close relationship with Egypt and shared elements of its culture. Nubia was also a unique African civilization with its own accomplishments. Key terms: commerce, ivory, interdependence, Meroitic script, and ebony. South of Egypt, farther up the Nile River, was a land that the Egyptians called Kush. We know this region today as Nubia. Today, Nubia extends from southern Egypt into northern Sudan. Trade brought Egypt and Nubia together. Egypt, trade in ancient Egypt. Egypt was rich in sunshine and fertile soil, but it lacked the forests, minerals, horses, and other useful natural resources found in Nubia and other countries. The people of ancient Egypt had to get these resources through trade or commerce with neighboring countries. Commerce is the buying and selling of goods and services. As their country grew in wealth, Egyptians also wanted to buy luxury goods from other lands. Luxury goods are expensive goods that are not needed, but that make life more enjoyable. Egyptian luxury goods included precious stones and perfumes. Trade gave Egypt access to goods it would not otherwise have. Trade in the Eastern Mediterranean. The pharaohs sent merchants and officials to other lands to promote trade. As early as the Old Kingdom, a pharaoh named Snefru promoted trade with lands on the Eastern Mediterranean Sea. Over here, our graphic is Nubian princes and their servants bring gold to Egypt. The area of modern Lebanon and the Eastern Mediterranean had forests that Egypt lacked. The Egyptians were eager to buy its cedar wood. In other Mediterranean lands, they bought olive oil and metals such as tin and copper. Trade in the Nile Valley. Snefru also boosted trade between Egypt and Nubia. Under later dynasties, trade between Egypt and Nubia increased. The most valuable goods that Egyptians bought in Nubia were gold and elephant tusks, which were a source of ivory, a hard white material made from these tusks. In return, the Egyptians sold grain, cloth, papyrus, glass, and jewelry. Egypt relied on Nubia's gold, and Nubia relied on Egypt's grain. Trade created interdependence, or dependence by each country or group on the other. Trade brought the Nubians into closer contact with ancient Egypt. Over time, the Nubians adopted elements of Egyptian culture, including Egyptian religion. So in our reading, relied. Rely means to depend or to trust. This graphic here, a model of an Egyptian seagoing ship. And then here's just a map of Egypt's trade routes. You can go ahead and see them. The land trade route, it looks like it's in green, and the water trade route looks like it's in blue. Egyptians used Nubian gold to make jewelry, and Egyptians used elephant tusks to make ivory. The land of Nubia. Like Egypt, Nubia had an ancient culture. Nubia's geography was similar to Egypt's in some ways and different in others. The geography of Nubia. Like Egypt, Nubia received very little rainfall. Deserts surrounded Nubia's Nile Valley. Like Egypt, Nubia depended on the Nile River and its annual floods. Its people farmed a narrow ribbon of fertile land along the Nile River. Their farming methods generated a surplus, though a smaller one than Egypt's. This surplus supported cities with artisans and merchants. However, the Nile's cataracts lay within Nubia. While Egyptians used boats, cataracts made it impossible to travel very far by boat in Nubia. Instead, people had to travel on foot through the rugged desert. Another difference from Egypt was that the Nubians had much less land to farm. As a result, the Nubians were sometimes short of food. This made them eager to trade gold, iron, and other products for Egypt's grain. Nubia was also in closer contact than Egypt with the peoples of Africa south of the Sahara. The Nubians traded goods and ideas with these peoples, just as they did with the Egyptians. Sources of information about Nubia. Scholars have used both historical records and archaeological evidence to learn about Nubia. Written records in Egypt document trade with Nubia. They also describe a powerful kingdom in Nubia modeled on the kingdom of Egypt. Some of the evidence of trade with Egypt comes from archaeology. Archaeologists have also found that the Nubians and Egyptians both saw kings as gods. This idea was common in Africa and may have come to Egypt through Nubia. So in our reading, we have the word generated. Generate means to produce or create. And then our graphic down here is a thin strip of fertile land borders the Nile at Napata, the first capital of Nubia. So here's our fertile strip of land right here. Okay. Nubia and Egypt. Through trade, the Egyptians discovered that Nubia was rich in resources, including gold. The Egyptians realized that the more gold they had, the more wood and other resources they could buy from the eastern Mediterranean. Egypt conquers Nubia. To gain more control over Nubia's riches, Egypt conquered most of Nubia for a time during the Middle Kingdom, and then again during the New Kingdom. The conquered Nubians had to pay tribute to the pharaoh. 1 year's tribute to the pharaoh, Thutmose III, included hundreds of pounds of gold, cattle, slaves, ivory, and ostrich feathers from Nubia. After the rule of Ramses II, Egypt weakened and the New Kingdom ended. Rival leaders in different cities fought for control of Egypt. Meanwhile, Nubia became an independent kingdom ruled by Nubian kings. Nubia conquers Egypt. In the mid-700s BC, a Nubian king conquered the Egyptian city of Thebes. The next ruler of Nubia, a king named Piye or Pianki, expanded the Nubian Empire by conquering one Egyptian city after another. Finally, Piye declared himself pharaoh of a united Egypt and Nubia. O mighty, mighty ruler, Pianki, O mighty ruler, you come having gained the dominion of the Northland. You are unto eternity. Your might endure, O ruler, beloved of Thebes. This was an inscription from the Victory Monument of Piye, translated by James Henry Breasted. Pharaohs from Nubia ruled Egypt for almost 100 years. Nubian rulers promoted the traditional Egyptian ways that they had learned under earlier pharaohs. They built temples to honor Nubian and Egyptian gods. The rulers from Nubia might have remained in power longer if they had been willing to govern only Egypt. Instead, they tried to expand their power. They went to war with the Assyrians, skillful warriors who had recently conquered the Fertile Crescent. This error in judgment led to the Nubians' downfall. Assyrian troops invaded Egypt around 665 BC. After losing many battles, the Nubians retreated from Egypt to Nubia. And our graphic up here is a modern painting of a Nubian pharaoh named Taharqa.